Hello Leeds Beckett University students, and welcome to webinar 3, which is all about creating a killer CV and acing those application forms. And you can see where this fits within our webinar series. So we have 8 topics, all based upon my book, From Learner to Earner. This is session 3. You're very welcome to join us on all 8, or just dip into the ones which are particularly relevant to you. So some brief introductions before we get stuck into the content. So I'm Sophie, I'm MD here at SRS. We work with employers and universities within the graduate recruitment space. So for employers, we help them by designing their assessment processes and materials and helping them to recruit their graduates. And we do a lot of work with universities with our assessment centre simulations and various employability initiatives. As I mentioned before, I'm also the author of the best-selling book, From Learner to Earner, which this series is based upon. You can see all of my various social media channels there on the screen. If we're not already connected, I'd love to connect with you on your chosen platform. Helen.
Hi, yeah, I'm the University Partnerships Manager for SRS. I work alongside Sophie to deliver these webinars, workshops, assessment centres. I'll be delivering the main content for you today. I hope you find it useful. Feel free to link in with us after and ask any follow-up questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks Helen. And we're always joined by a guest expert on our webinar series. Who have we got today, Helen?
So today we have Helen Gates, who's been hired by lots of graduate recruiters over the years to support with their recruitment process. She'll be sharing some of her insights with us a bit later on.
Fantastic. Well, as Helen said, she's going to be taking the lead on today's session, and I'll pop back in shortly. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Sophie. So you'll see from the agenda that we're going to cover, does your CV include the right things? How do you write a great cover letter? What makes a good application form? And those are some of the things that we'll be talking through over the course of the webinar. And I should say at this point that although a lot of hints and tips we share will be applicable to all industries, we're going to be mainly looking at this from the perspective of a UK employer. So your CV is usually the first opportunity you have to make an impact. On average, how much time do you think an employer spends reading a CV? It's only about 6.25 seconds, and it's even less if it doesn't grab their attention. How many graduate CVs are rejected? It's about 50%. And finally, how many applications does the average firm receive for graduate positions? It's about 2,000, with at least 50 per actual job. And obviously that's probably going to be even higher now with the recent pandemic. Therefore, you can see how important it is to have a good CV. And I'll go on to talk about how you can get the basics right. But before we go into any kind of detail, I want to start by drawing your attention to the most important point. For every different organisation and job you apply to, you must tailor and change your CV to reflect this. Creating a CV is definitely not a one-off exercise, and employers will be looking to see that you've understood the job requirements and have matched this to your experience. It should be clear from your CV that you want to work for them and not just any organisation. There are lots of different types of CV and formats that you can use, and it may sometimes be appropriate to think outside the box if you're going for a specific role in the creative industry, for example. However, regardless of what format you decide to use, the main thing is that your CV reflects your professional identity and is relevant to the particular job. You'll see on the screen some hints and tips with regards to general layout and presentation. And the ones I would particularly pull out are the following. Aim to have 2 full pages for your CV. 1 page is too short, and it can indicate a lack of experience or a lack of thought that's gone into the CV. More than 2 pages is too long. You need to remember how many CVs the recruiter will be having to check. Make it easy for the recruiter to read and review your CV. So rather than long paragraphs and small text, use an appropriate font and break up your content with bullet points and subheadings. Also, get someone to proofread it. When you've been working on your CV for so long, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees, and a fresh pair of eyes is likely to pick up on incorrect spelling, bad formatting, and whether or not it all makes sense. I continue to be amazed at the very obvious mistakes in some of the CVs that I've screened, and so this is definitely a really important point to get someone to check it. Your personal details need to include all your contact information, such as email address and phone number. And you don't need to include things like date of birth, nationality, marital status, or passport number. And for most UK jobs, it's not advisable to include a photo. Now, the personal profile or statement is probably the most important part of your CV, and it'll be the first thing that most recruiters will read. Therefore, it's got to grab their attention. It should be a short summary providing an overview of who you are, what skills and experience you can bring to the role, and why you want to work for them. Now let's have a look at a couple of examples. I'm a dynamic, passionate, enthusiastic student. I'm also a great team leader and team player. I'm looking for a graduate job that will help me to develop my skills further. Now this profile is too brief. It doesn't actually say anything. It's really vague. It's got some buzzwords in it, but there's no evidence to back them up. We go on to have a look at the second example. I'm a final year student on track for a strong 2-1 in accounting at the University of Liverpool. My passion for career in finance was ignited following my work experience at a local accountancy firm and nurtured through several relevant internships. The strong leadership skills developed through my extracurricular activities, treasurer of the Business Society and vice captain of the rugby team, make me a strong candidate for a role in the KPMG graduate scheme. Now, this is a really strong profile. It's clear who the candidate is, and their passion appears more genuine with relevant evidence to support their aim. The candidate has also tailored their profile to their application and included skills which would be attractive to an employer such as KPMG. Employment history. Now, ideally, this section should include all of your paid jobs and work experience. Although if you've got a lot, you may need to prioritise the most relevant. Make sure you start with the most recent role first and include job titles, organisation names, dates employed, and key responsibilities. You shouldn't include details of your salary, your reasons for leaving, or the contact details of your employer. Make sure you highlight your achievements within your work experience, using evidence, things like quantitative data wherever possible. For example, if you worked within a supermarket, perhaps you increase sales by 10% on your food service counter. When talking about your responsibilities, link them to key skills that are required by the employer. You might think some of your work experience isn't relevant, but as long as you draw attention to those transferable skills, you should include all of your part-time, temporary, and voluntary work. And you can see an example here on the screen. They've highlighted the key details from their employment, but they've also drawn out those key achievements and backed it up with data. You need to include details of your education and qualifications, including dates and types. Now, if you've got a lot of work experience, it may not be necessary to go as far back as secondary education. Really think about how you lay out this section, because rather than a long list of subjects and results, try and condense this into a summary that could be like 4 GCSEs at grade A, 2 at grade B, and so on. Does this all mean you've got more space on your CV for other things? I've seen a lot of CVs where one page is literally given up to a list of qualifications, which really doesn't add anything in terms of the skills and what they learned as part of those qualifications. So think about that layout. Also, highlight what you've learned from your education, as this section gives you another opportunity to draw out those soft skills, such as working as a team to produce a module presentation, things like that. And again, you've got another example here of a short summary of a degree and what they've chosen to draw out of what they've learned so far. Now, it's not compulsory, but it helps to make you stand out when you have a section focused on your skills. Along with the rest of your CV, this section needs to be tailored to the specific job you're applying for. You should start by reviewing the job description and identifying 5 to 6 key skills that you're looking for. Try ordering them in the level of importance. And remember, anyone can make up a list of skills and put this in their CV. Instead, you need to provide a strong and specific example for each. Remember, you can draw from your education, your work experience, and extracurricular activities. The more relevant and unique, the better. And here again, you've got an example here of how the candidate has identified 2 key skills from the job description and provided a really powerful example of each. It's something I commonly come across in a lot of CVs where candidates have just listed buzzwords. They've just listed teamwork, leadership, commercial awareness, but haven't provided evidence of those skills. It's good to include any extracurricular activities, but only if you can show how they're relevant to the role. For example, if you're going to mention about traveling the world, link this to how you had to be organised and how you had to plan the details. Things such as socialising with friends or going to the cinema, they don't add anything of value. Alternatively, by being in a football team, you could talk about how you show teamwork, or by being a member of the debating society, how you take account of other people's views. Always link those activities back to key skills that the employer is looking for. With regards to references, there's no need to include full contact details of references because you've got more important things that you need to use that space for. Instead, just have a statement at the end which just says references available on request, and they can always ask you for more information. And here you've got an example of the CV that we've pulled together to give you an idea of a typical format and how you would go about drawing out those key skills and achievements. As I say, you'll have the webinar recording. You'll be able to pause at this point and refer back to it. So in summary, our top tips for a great CV: tailor the content each time you apply for a job. Definitely the most important point. Make sure your CV is an honest reflection of you and your experiences, otherwise you will get found out later in the process. Highlight relevant skills and achievements throughout. Ensure your CV grabs the reader's attention and lead with that great opening personal statement. Check that the formatting is consistent and that you've made the best use of those 2 pages. Again, back to that point around getting someone to check and proofread your CV. Definitely take advantage of your career service in this respect. I'm now going to show you a short video from Helen Gates, who provides her insight into the most important points. And as mentioned, Helen's helped us screen and assess a lot of candidates for graduate employers. She also helps our own assessment centre experiences. So hopefully you'll find this helpful.
Hi, my name's Helen Gates and I'm one of the assessors for Smart Resourcing. One of the most important things about writing a really good CV is that you showcase your skills and abilities, no matter where these have come from, and that you really make sure that these match up with the job description for the role that you're applying for. Have a good look at that job description before you do your CV, and then you'll know the key skills and abilities that they're looking for. Then you can try and see where these match the skills you've got and how you can explain them in the context in which you've developed them. This might be from your professional working jobs, from internships, from volunteering, sport, interests, every area of your life. You can bring these skills into the forefront and make them a really good match for the role. In this way, you make it really easy for the reader to understand who you are, what you're bringing to the table, and how they can easily match it up to the role. Don't lead them on a wild treasure hunt, but bring them your pure gold. Show them your skills, your abilities, and the results that you've got from having developed them over time.
Thanks very much to Helen there. So cover letters. So cover letter is an important tool and it's usually sent out to employers along with your CV. It's one of the easiest and most effective ways to stand out from the crowd, and it brings to the table a little extra information about you and what you can offer the organisation. Before we go into any hints and tips, I'd like you to take a couple of minutes to read through the following example cover letter. Now, for the purpose of this webinar, I've left off the contact details so that it fits more easily on the screen, but usually you would have your personal details, the address of the organisation, and the date you sent the letter at the top. So what's good about this letter? Overall, it's easy to read and review. There's no long, heavy paragraphs and it fits on one page. It's also well structured. It's got a distinct paragraph showing why they want to work for the organisation and a distinct paragraph that focuses on their skills and experience. In particular, it's got a great opening summary which clarifies what they're applying for, specifically mentions the organisation and highlights key experience. Now this instantly grabs the attention of the reader because it's a unique opening. Following on from this, the second paragraph draws attention to their interaction with Unilever and the research they've done. Now it's great if you can say you've attended one of the employer's events or workshops or spoken to some of their employees. If you can't say this, then at least take the time to really research them online. A lot of candidates respond with the same headline information that's been taken from the main website homepage. It's always good to delve that bit deeper as it'll help to show your enthusiasm to the employer. So what could be better about this letter? First off, there are spelling mistakes, with even Unilever being spelt wrong in the second paragraph. Now this looks really lazy, as it shows that you haven't used a spell check and you haven't asked someone else to proofread your letter. In the second paragraph, they've listed some key skills. However, they've not given specific examples of these. Anyone can write a list of skills. The key is to show examples of them and how they will be of benefit to the role. For example, you could say, as a football coach, I had to have many challenging conversations with my peers, which would be helpful when negotiating with clients at Unilever. So not only there have you listed a key skill, you've backed it up with evidence and linked it to how it would help in that particular role. Now, clearly you haven't got room in your cover letter to give examples for every skill, so pick a couple of the most important or relevant ones. When drawing attention to your experience, try to use unique examples from your work experience or extracurricular activities. Your degree is clearly relevant, but remember you'll be applying alongside lots of other students or graduates who all have degrees and have all completed module projects and written dissertations. Finally, the letter closes with, I would appreciate hearing from you in the next 7 days. You should close with a summary of your interest in the job and not put pressure on the employer to come back to you within a timescale. So to summarise, the top tips for writing a cover letter: it's often best to use your traditional format and layout, with their address and yours at the top, along with the date you sent the letter. I wouldn't be tempted to use fancy fonts, borders, colour or big headings. You should also try and find out the hiring manager's name, so that you can write to them personally rather than just dear sir or madam. Make it easy to read and review. Think about how many cover letters the recruiter is having to read and stick to one page. Have manageable size paragraphs. There should be a clear structure based around 4 key things: an opening introduction, a section on why you want to work for them, a section on what you can bring to the role, and a closing summary. As we talked about in the last example cover letter, research the company and show your enthusiasm. Typically, there should be 1 paragraph dedicated to this. Highlight your skills and experience. Prioritise your greatest achievements or your most relevant work experience, giving those specific examples and linking it back to the role. You should also try and showcase your personality by using those unique examples, mentioning what drives you or what you want to develop as part of this role. And finally, as with CVs, make sure you get someone to check your letter for things such as spelling and grammar. Now, the length of the recruitment process can be very daunting, and it could be that you have to submit a CV, a cover letter, and an application form. If this is the case, don't duplicate the same content word for word across the 3 documents. You'll be surprised by how many people do this, where there's a question on the application form where the candidate has just copied and pasted from their cover letter. Not a good idea. Let's look at some other top tips with regards to application forms. Make sure you read and follow all the instructions. And if you're able to, review the whole application before making a start. Answer every question fully and make full use of the word count to get the maximum score for each question. For example, if you're given 200 words to answer, you should be writing between 180 to 200 words. Make sure your details are correct, such as your contact information and dates of your employment. Provide a consistent level of detail across your work experience and use this as another opportunity to highlight those key skills alongside your responsibilities. If there is a section for additional information, never leave this blank and try to include something extra of relevance or value that you couldn't mention in previous questions. As always, proofread your application thoroughly, checking your spelling and grammar. And finally, use the STAR technique, which we'll go on to talk about. But before we do, I just want to give you an idea of some typical competency-based questions. We're going to be looking at those, but I wanted to draw your attention to a question like the one on the screen. Explain your motivation for applying to our organisation, highlighting the skills and experience that make you a strong candidate. This is a really important question, and here is an example of a weak response. I have excellent verbal communication skills. At the same time, I know how to strengthen my relationships with colleagues and customers. As you can see from my CV, I also have great experience in business operations. I would enjoy creating business plans and updating financial records to support the business. For these types of questions, you need to make it clear why you specifically want to work for them and not some other organisation. Use your answer as an opportunity to show off your research, and as we've mentioned before, don't just list skills, provide further specific examples. Don't rely on your CV to fill in the gaps. I'm now going to hand you over to Sophie, who's going to talk you through that all-important STAR technique.
Thank you, Helen. So as you can see there, we have the STAR technique on the screen. Now you may have come across this before, and if you have, it's likely that you've come across it without the extra R on the end. So I'm just going to talk you through how it works. Remember, you can come back to this slide at any point when you're doing application forms. It's also useful for interview questions, so interview prep as well. So it's a model that you can use to answer the questions in a very thorough way that is going to hopefully address all of the criteria that the marker is looking for. So you start off with your situation and describing what that was and the task, and then you move in to focus more on the task, describing the challenges and what needed to be done and why. You then move on to the action, and it's really important that when you're looking at the action that you focus on the action that you took rather than as a group, so you need to make it really clear what your role was. And then you end up finishing with the result, ideally with something tangible so that we can see the results, and then the reflection. So what did you learn from taking part in that? What would you do differently next time? That sort of thing. So if we were to apply that to a real experience, so let's think, for example, if you were asked to respond to a question where you were asked to describe a time when you've worked under pressure, what you could use in that scenario might be a time where you had a part-time job, where you were working in a busy restaurant, for example. So that's the situation. You had a part-time job working in a busy local restaurant. Your role was normally to greet the guests. You were the host, and on this particular day you had a lot of sickness within the serving team, so with the waiters, and you had some previous experience in that area, so you were able to adapt. The action you took was to support the waiting staff by delivering plates of food to the customers, and the result was that all of the customers were seated and fed within a reasonable amount of time, so they didn't realise that there was an issue. And although it was a long and tiring shift, you worked together as a team and got a great result. The reflection in that scenario might be that on reflection, you realise that it would be really useful if all members of staff at the restaurant were trained in different areas, so that if there was another incident where there were members of the team that were off sick, you were able to cover for each other more effectively. So that might be an example that you might use. It's good to use examples if you can from work-based examples, because they'll always be unique to you rather than course ones. So just to re-emphasise that. Okay, back to you, Helen.
Brilliant, thanks Sophie. Well, that brings us to the end of the webinar. So in terms of what we'll be looking at next time, it will be online tests in terms of what types there are, what to expect, and some top tips on how you can practice and get yourself in the right place to do those tests. So Sophie, would you like to talk through the resources we've got?
So as always, we've got a few resources here for you, which we'll make available with this session. So we have some CV templates, cover letter templates, and as always, we're going to refer you back to the career service, because we know that they're doing some great stuff, and they will have some relevant resources and sessions that would complement this session as well. So definitely check out what they've got available, and you can also see there in the graphic of the book. So if you want to have a look at that, you'll find it over on Amazon. And then finally, just to finish up, here are our social channels for SRS and also for your career service. So if you're not already following either of us on one of those channels, then feel free to connect with us on your chosen platform. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we hope to see you on a future session.
Thank you.